right. Final question for the episode is from Pierre, who quotes Flannery O'Connor as saying, "Push back against the age, as hard as it pushes against you." With that in mind, what are some joyful activities you partake in? Basically, how can we be gladder trads? Mm.
That's a good question. So where do I start? Well, oddly enough, with the Mass itself, with the liturgy, um, I I go to I go as often as I can because honestly, daily communion is the answer to so many problems. And of course, it presupposes fairly frequent confession. And those things are really, really, I mean, that's the sine qua non. Then you've got the various devotions adding on to that adoration, the Sacred Heart, the Precious Blood, the Rosary. Our Lady is as far as your Rosary and as close. Um, you're the master of your own home, your own room. So the things you choose to surround yourself with, the artwork, etc., the books you read, the music you listen to, the films or television or internet you watch, these can all be sources of joy. All right, I love smoking my pipe. There, I've said it. And I like drinks with friends. That's true. I have to admit, I don't drink alone. It's because it's not fun. Uh, and as I get older, I'm afraid my taste for alcohol is somewhat diminished. Not for any conscious reason. It's just I can't drink the amount I used to, so I don't even try. But last night's dinner was the epitome of the kind of thing I like. A pleasant time with your hosts, telling stories, singing songs, that kind of thing. If you can travel and visit uh, not just shrines, although shrines are great, but museums, places of historic interest, beautiful landscapes, even if they're very close by. I mean, suss out your own area. You may not have the time to go gawk at the Grand Canyon, but I guarantee you can take a drive through the nicer neighborhoods in your own town. And that, you've often heard me say that uh, when I was somewhat down, a drive through the gardens of San Marino and South Pasadena would really pick me up. But they do because they're lovely. Uh, thinking good thoughts. As I said to you, it occurred to me how much beautiful stuff there is in the world. There is a lot of really, really marvelous, marvelous things out there. Even if you never get to see them all, even if you're not in a position to visit the most or any of them, be happy and grateful that they're there. And that, you see, gratitude, that at the end of the day is really what makes one happy. To be grateful to God for everything you have, to be grateful first and foremost for the gift of life and thus the chance at salvation that you have, to be grateful for your friends and relations, even if they don't always please you the way you want to be pleased. My late father used to say, if you don't have everything you want everything you have. And I think that's a very wise turn of phrase because we're here for such a short time. Uh, a blink of an eye and we're old. Another blink and we're dead. So appreciate what you've got. Have a sense of humor. One of the underlying realities of the human condition is that is its absurdity. The I've always believed that the emperor's new clothes is the greatest epitome of human life. With everyone else, with the little kid, and with ourselves, with the emperor. And if you can learn to accept that everyone else thinks of themselves as the emperor, and not laugh too hard at it, and then realize you do yourself and laugh as hard as you like, you'll be a lot happier. You know, my late father, again, used to say, there's only one thing that makes my fellow man tolerable to me. I said, what's that? The knowledge that I'm just like him. But if it wasn't for that, oh, what a reign of terror I would unleash. And that geniality is a very important thing. You know, it's as easy to be pleasant as nasty. Uh, and if you don't have to be nasty, if you're not standing up and defending the right, why be persnickety? Why be annoying? How much does a smile cost you? And I realize I'm beginning to sound like a Hallmark card, but you know, there's a certain amount of truth to it when it comes to lower level things. When you go into a McDonald's, when you're in a Denny's, why not smile at the waiter or the waitress or tease them a bit and make their day? Why not give 50 cents extra to the tip that you would have given? Why not make things a bit smoother?
You know, I that touches on a really cool line that I read. I don't know where I read from. I'm reading so many spiritual books lately. Maybe it's from My Daily Bread. But the person said it's hard to do good in the beginning. It's hard to live a holy life in the beginning, but it gets easier.
Ugh,
Evil is the exact opposite. It's easy to do evil, for starters, but to do it long term, that thing gets tedious. It gets difficult, and I thought that was so interesting and true. At least perhaps
it
for normal
is.
people, for normal human beings, but and I thought that was inspiring because I'm in the hard part of doing good, and so that gives hope that you fortify, like Jesus will fortify you, so that it gets easier. You know.
He will. And the thing, too, to remember, if we're tempted to disregard as unimportant the little acts of kindness that anybody could do, regardless of their religion or anything else, remember that grace builds on nature. You know, the natural virtues are not salvific, they won't bring you to heaven. But without an attempt at them, you won't get to go anywhere with the supernatural virtues. Grace builds on nature. If you try to be pleasant, you try to make life easier for the people around you, it will have all sorts of rewards. And if you unite it to your pursuit of the supernatural, it'll become a means of grace, not just an actual grace, which of course it would be in any case, but of sanctifying grace. Of course, the trick is always to bear in mind you're doing it for a higher purpose. You're not being nice just to be nice, but to make things better. You know, one of the reasons why Freemasonry has such a stranglehold on the Anglo-American world is because rather than it completely buries the supernatural under a patina of natural goodness. Well, of course, that's wrong, but it's important to realize that that's also why it's effective, because they try to be good in the here and now. Well, the fact that we have to keep our eyes on a higher prize in the here and now does not excuse us from trying to be good in the here and now. We should be more pleasant than the Freemasons, better company than the Shriners, especially because we're practicing and believing Catholics. We, if our brethren in the world who don't have our supernatural beliefs or hopes are able to manage it, we should be able to do so and better than they do. Uh, Our Lord said the children of darkness are wiser in their generation than the children of light. Well, that's one of the things, you know, that's involved here. So be pleasant, be gentle with people if you can, be genteel. Uh, gentle, genteel, gentleman, gentility. These are all connected.
I'd like to just reinforce one of the things you said. It ended up being the first thing you said in terms of how to be a gladder-trad. The very first thing you said was daily mass.
Yeah.
I just wanted to speak about that as someone who, for the vast majority, for 95, 90+% of my life, not going to daily mass. In my 20s, I think I listened to a Bill and Charles talk, Biersack and Coulomb, from the 90s. And you guys, and Professor Biersack had this really thought-provoking monologue on how real is your faith, looking internally and asking yourself, how real is your faith really? And he asked a bunch of different questions, hard-hitting questions. I can't remember the questions, but I remember the question I would ask myself, because I wanted to go to daily mass, but it's hard to wake up. It's really hard to wake up early, especially if you're going to work. You'd have to find a really early mass to go in time, safely in time before going to work. And I remember thinking to myself, what would I wake up for? What would actually really get me to wake up for mass? And I thought to myself an answer. I thought, I'd wake up for $200. If I went to if I woke up that early and I was handed $200, I would do that 100%. Absolutely no questions asked, and feel great about it. So that's a moment where you get to see, it's like, oh, okay, well, my faith, so that's the value. Like, it's not even worth $200 for me. It's like, okay. And I carried that for even realizing that, it took me like a decade and a half of just waffling. And I have to say, since doing that, starting in October, it is a new season of life. It's a new season of life. And I ultimately, what made me do it, what was the catalyst, is I was roller coastering emotionally. I was on an emotional roller coaster. I was frustrated a lot, and then I was scared a lot. And then you'd have good moments, but then you go back down again. And I wanted to replace that frustration, that fear, with patience and peace. And the daily mass will do that for you. And so much of it, honestly, looking at myself, it's really rooted in ego. Conflict in people. If you can just bury that ego, it's unbelievable how much happier you're going to be and how many bombs you can sidestep. It really is.
There's some quotes here from Tolkien I'd like to read.
Yeah.
About the Blessed Sacrament. And I think it's worthwhile. He says, out of the darkness of my life, so much frustrated, I put before you the one great thing to love on earth, the Blessed Sacrament. There you will find romance, glory, honor, fidelity, and the true way of all your loves on earth. And more than that, death. By the divine paradox, that which ends life and demands the surrender of all, and yet, by the taste or foretaste of which alone can what you seek in your earthly relationships, love, faithfulness, joy, be maintained, or take on that complexion of reality. of eternal endurance, which every man's heart desires. The only cure for sagging or fainting faith is communion. Though always itself perfect and complete and inviolate, the Blessed Sacrament does not operate completely and at once for all in any of us. Like the act of faith, it must be continuous and grow by exercise. Frequency is of the highest effect. 7 times a week is more nourishing than 7 times in intervals. Also, I can recommend this as an exercise, alas, only too easy to find opportunity for. Make your communion in circumstances that affront your taste. Choose a snuffling or gabbing priest or a proud and vulgar friar, and a church full of the usual bourgeois crowd, ill-behaved children, from those who yell to those products of Catholic schools, who the moment the tabernacle is open sit back and yawn. Open-necked and dirty youths, women in trousers, and often with hair both unkempt and uncovered. Go to communion with them and pray for them. It will be just the same or better than that, as the Mass said beautifully by a visibly holy man and shared by a few devout and decorous people. It could not be worse than the feeding of the 5,000, after which our Lord propounded the feeding that was to come.
Wow. That's a good one for me too, because sometimes on the daily mass I happen to think, I happen to have some uncharitable thoughts. Like I personally, I think, I'm not going for you, Father. I'm not going to daily mass to see you. I'm going for the Eucharist. But now hearing that, it sounds like that's a good thing. That's an extra thing to overcome, I guess, for the greater glory of God.
Course.
Yeah.
Of course. And when you receive worthily, you are as close to heaven for the next few minutes as you can be this side of the grave. There's I forget who said it, but there's a wonderful line about receive thou me, O Lord, as I have received thee. We receive him into us, but he in turn takes us into him. And that's what we all strive for. That's what we're really after doing. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that foretaste of heaven, well, if we make it to heaven, all of the pains, struggles, and difficulties of this life, which we all face, be like a bad dream. And I was thinking about this last night at the Terex when I was chatting with the kids and with Uriah and Basil. Time is really a tyrant. We can't know either our elders or our juniors as we know our equals. And I don't think there's anybody born who doesn't fantasize at some point of having known their parents when they were their age. And contrariwise, when you look at people younger than yourself, you'll never know the world they're living in right now. Because even if you went to school or work with them, the chemistry would change because you're there. You're separated from those older and those younger than you by the tyranny of time. But all that will be gone in heaven. We'll get to know each of us, everyone you've loved, again, either you're elder or you're younger, without the walls that time puts up. And you'll know your peers more intimately than you can know them on earth. Because what is it that separates us from one from another? It's our selfishness, our ego, our pride. And that'll all be gone. We won't be afraid of revealing too much, or worse yet, stupid enough to reveal too much, because that issue won't exist. And there'll be nothing to hide. There'll be nothing at all to hide. And we will follow the divine will as naturally as we follow our own now. Isn't that something? Being in a position where I want to do the right thing, just as naturally as I want to take a sip from this cup of coffee. I mean, what a thought. And it comes hard to us in this life. It's hard for us to put either the divine will or the good of the neighbor above our own. It's hard. It's difficult. It takes work. And very often we can't even see it. We can't even figure out what is the divine will or the good of the neighbor in this particular case. We blind ourselves.
I think about that a lot. Like, the arduous good, doing God's will, is incredibly hard. And so when we get to heaven, it's just more of God's will. But hopefully it'll be a little bit different.
Well, it'll be quite different. It'll be, as I say, as natural. I mean, even when I say, well, we'll all do God's will, it sounds like there'll be compulsion, but there won't be.
Yeah.
Well, there won't be any compulsion. We'll want to do it there as much as we want to do our own now.
Mm.
And quite as naturally, quite as evenly, quite as, as I say, as much as I want to drink this coffee to the end of the cup, in heaven, I want to do God's will every given moment, just that naturally and that fervently. I mean, now we may even get to the point to where, okay, we'll do God's will. But do we do it with the kind of fervor with which we order what we want off the menu?
Yeah.
You look at the menu and you go, oh my gosh, goose soup. Oh, roast venison. You got it. Well, to want to do God's will with the kind of fervor that we order our favorite foods off the menu, from the menu, I should say. That is an amazing thought. And to want the best for everyone around us as naturally as we want our own. Not being an afterthought, not being something we make ourselves do, but it's just, you no more, in heaven, you can no more not think of doing it than you could not think of doing your own will now.
Hmm.
So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope I make it, because the alternative, it's not just that the thing itself is so wonderful, the alternative is so horrible.
Yeah.
And that's, again, why I say, even room for Susan from the parish council. She may be a shrew, but gosh, I don't want her to go to hell.